Welcome everyone. Thanks for stopping by. This is my PD Redux video where I'm going to take a second look at PD weapons for Distant Worlds 2. So my first PD video stirred up a lot of controversy, and I'm over exaggerating. It wasn't really controversy. It was just a lot of viewers pointing out, that my look at the PD weapons wasn't super scientific or very scientific even. And that's okay, right? I love hearing feedback from people. It was great. We had some good discussions in the comments sections of that video. Take a look, and also on Reddit and a couple other places. So I'm glad it stirred up some questions and discussion. But today I'm going to take a much deeper look, and I'm going to make it a little more scientific. Now, that being said, I want to be clear that, it's still going to be down to some gut instinct, because not everything's apples to apples. Not everything's going to be perfect on this comparison. But I'm going to go into a lot more detail. We're going to count hits versus misses. So we're going to do a lot about the to hit percent chance. We're going to talk about damage. A lot of questions I get is, do missiles have damage, hit points? How do we know how much damage they take? What happens when they're damaged? When they, when they get through the PDs? So it's going to be pretty good as far as details are concerned, but it's never going to be perfect, right? So it's going to come down, and I encourage you to make your own, based on my data and my videos here, make your own, decisions or opinions about what weapon you think is best. And I'm going to focus on PD versus seeking weapons, just because I spent a lot of time on focus versus fighters last time. But at the end, after I go into the very detailed section on PD weapons versus seeking weapons, that's torpedoes and missiles, mostly, I will also show some quick videos of my tests I did and with the same weapons versus fighters. Those weapons, however, will be tier 4 for the most part. I will cover that when we get to it. Whereas the seeking weapons is going to be identical to the designs, or similar to the designs that I used in my first PD video. So the seeking weapon section we're going to do first will be with the tier 3 PD weapons, or tier 2/tier 3, because not every PD weapon has a tier 2. But I'll re-explain that when we get to it. And I'll put up a chart and you'll see exactly what versions we're talking about. But in the end, whether it's tier 3 or tier 4, I think you're going to get a good feel as to which PD weapons are the most effective, or which group of weapons are the most effective, and which are the least effective. And hopefully that'll help you make decisions when you're playing the game and customizing your ships. All right. Before we go into all of that, though, I'm going to quick take a detour, maybe 2 minutes here, to explain an omission I made on my combat and weapons video, where I neglected to include something called armor reactive rating. And what happened was, if you look at the research screen here, which I'll call up, and we go to armor, I was reading this wrong, and this is my bad. But if you look at the armors when I get to them, armor plating. I think I had layered armor in that video. Anyway, I kept looking at the left-hand side here where the reactive rating is 1, and I wasn't even looking at fighter versus regular ships, but that's actually heavy armor for fighters, FTR, fighter only. And I've used this before, so I don't even know what I was thinking about. But my point here was that I thought the reacting rating was 1, and I kind of left it out of my calculations, and I was going to put it in, and I was like, nah, it's not really making a big effect. But actually, even on these early armors, as you can see where I should have been looking on the right side, the reactive rating is 4. And what this reactive rating does is similar to the shields features we talked about, is it reduces any damage per shot, right? Per missile, per torpedo, for example. It reduces the damage by 4 when it hits the shield, right? So if you're doing 10, and in my videos, they weren't doing a lot of damage because we weren't getting through the shields much. It was just the bypass. So what was happening is I was saying that I don't think shield bypassing is working very well. And the reason why that I was seeing that or thinking that was because the reactive rating of 4 here was actually pretty much negating any of the pass or bypass damage that my torpedoes were doing. And I thought it was negligent because I thought it was negligible, excuse me, because I thought it was 1, not 4, but it actually ended up being 4. So 2, quick corrections. I'll put up the damage chart here. You'll see it right now that I used in my previous video, and you'll see I've added a line here for the reactive rating of heavy armor. And that explains a lot what was going on in the video, which was the bypass damage when it bypassed the shield wasn't doing much, and it shouldn't have, because I think there was only 4 points of damage in most cases that was passing through, and the reactive rating of my heavy armor was blocking it completely, and that's the way it should have worked. So 2 quick things is, don't forget when you're considering damage that the armor has a reactive rating which takes right away 4 points off of any hit to the armor, regardless of whether the shields it was bypass or not. And the second thing is that I just want to make sure everybody knows the bypass is working as far as I can tell. And I haven't been able to test it, but the shield bypass damage is working, or at least my videos don't prove that it's not working. All right, so that out of the way, I'm going to jump in. We're going to start with the buckler repeating blaster. I think we're going to start with that one. And let's take a look at how these PD weapons work versus seeking weapons. Again, versus missiles and torpedoes, and I'm going to be specifically covering missiles in this next section. Okay, this is the buckler repeating blaster test. Let's take a look at the stats on that. The red is really only when it shoots at other ships, but the purple is what we care about. The 9 damage it's going to do to seeking weapons and the plus 25% to hit. And then let's take a look at the target, which is going to be concussion missiles. It's going to be on 2 pirate ships, okay? And the concussion missiles have 16 damage. That's actually their hit points too, right? So when you damage it, it comes off of that 16. And it's got a 61% countermeasures versus PD, so that's going to take away our 2 hit chances. And it'll take 2 hits at least for us, 2 hits for us to take one of those missiles down with our PD. But 1 hit will damage it enough that it does very little damage on our ship. So the hit chance is some base that I'm not sure about, plus 25%, minus 61%. The base might be it's normal to hit, I'm not sure, or it might be 100%, but you'll see at the end of the battle what my percent number of hits versus not hits versus misses is going to be. All right. So the thing to watch out for, you're going to have to pause the video a lot because the hits are going to come quickly. And the way you can tell if a damaged missile, if a missile was damaged, was when you see it hit the shields on the Angry Star on my ship, you'll see that it only drops by about 4 or 5. When a regular missile hits, it's going to hit for about 12. And I'll put those stats up as where those damage comes up in a little bit. But so here they come, about 32 missiles. There it goes. Again, you may want to pause to read these, and you can tell how I know whether it's a hit or whether it's just a destroyed missile. And watch the shields go down per every missile that hits, and you'll see. And I'm going to count up all these misses and hits at the end and do a quick summary. Yeah, so anyway, and this is a tier 2 PD versus most of the other ones are going to be tier 3. So I expect its results to be a little worse. It is hitting pretty well. I think we're up to 8 damaged, and yeah, there it is, 9 damaged intercepts. So 9 missiles were intercepted. And I'm going to keep track of each of these as we go through. So 9 were intercepted, 23 got through, 4 were destroyed, and 5 were damaged. The damage is almost as good, by the way, as a destroyed, because by the time that missile hits, it's only like 4 or 5 damage versus the 13, and the shield kind of is recharging the whole time. So, I mean, a lot of missiles hitting at 4 can be obviously do some damage, but damaging a missile is almost as good. You know, it's good, and it definitely does reduce your damage here. So notice the shields took a 28% of their damage. So he got pretty beat up by these missiles, but overall pretty good. Okay, the blocking field generator. So this is a tough one. Let me show you the important stats here. First of all, it's got a 25 damage, which is great, and it fires every 4 seconds. So that's really important when we start talking about what happens in this video. And again, you may want to pause it at the hits so you can read some of the messages that flash. But this is the problem. The problem is there's a big gap between when it fires. So I'm guessing that the animation, the beam animation, is not showing up when the missile is hit very close to the ship. And the second thing that's happening is there is a 1 damage. Some of the missiles hit the ship and only do 1 damage to the armor. And there's that big fireball explosion. So I'm guessing that even though it's not clear that because you don't see a beam, I'm guessing it's hitting those missiles and destroying them so close to the ship that the ship takes 1 armor damage. I don't know why the shield wouldn't take a damage, but there's really no way to know. So for this particular guy, I did a couple of things. I assumed because they did so little damage to the ship, I gave them credit for those hits, even though I'm not 100% sure that it's the PD doing the damage. And the second thing that I did is, because you can't see the misses from what I'm guessing, I based the number of misses on 15 shots. So in a 60 seconds divided by 4, there should have been 15 shots altogether. So using that math, I kind of figured out the misses, and it hits about a 60% to hit rate, which is about right. So I'm going to stick to these numbers, even though it's very, very unclear. And I have to say, of all the tests, this is the one that is, gives me the most doubt or the most questions, really. So if you have any comments about that, I'd love to hear them. And let's go to the next one. Okay, the Sentinel multi-beam. Now, this one's another hard one to call. First of all, it does 9 damage here, and it's got a 25% intercept targeting. So that's good. But the problem is it shoots 4 shots per volley, and as you watch each beam shoot out, right, you can't tell how many there are. Now, I know that's more than 1 because when it destroys a target, it couldn't have hit it with just 1 shot, right? So it's hard to tell. So I'm not going to count the actual shots because there's no way to determine that. We're going to count the number of volleys, and there are a fair amount of them. For one reason or another, I can't remember why, I did include torpedoes in this ship, whereas most of the other ships don't have torpedoes. So the torpedoes actually take out 2 of the targets here, and I didn't credit it to the Sentinel multi-beam, but it still does very, very well. And again, you may want to pause, as I was mentioning earlier, but it does very, very well. So I'm not too concerned about the 2 I missed. But as I said, it's not perfect. It's not scientific. It's just a good feel, right? And in the end result, I'm not stealing anything from this weapon because it's doing work. And it's got nothing to be ashamed of. But again, it'll be a little off. Again, I'm determining damage by the fact that when it hits the ship, it doesn't do as much damage. Okay, so this is a really, really good result, right? 6 destroyed, 6 damaged, 76% to hit rate. Again, that's a little, not really sure because it's not per shot, it's per volley, but still great results. Only 11% shield damage, so it hardly took any damage. And it neutralized 43%, meaning it damaged or destroyed 43% of the incoming missiles. So that was crazy good. All right, let's go on to the next one. Okay, the Ion Pulse Blaster. Let's take a look at its stats. So it's got a 12 damage against seeking weapons and a 30% intercept targeting. That's pretty good. So, just as a side about all of these tests, I did the best I could to mark down every hit and miss. And of course, there could be mistakes, right? There could be small errors. Hopefully no big errors. But as you go through each one of these, I did do them, most of these tests I did 3 times, and I tried to pick, of the 3 videos that I got for each test, I tried to pick the average of the 3, because they weren't that different, I should say, but in fact, some of them are very similar, but there were differences, so I tried to take the middle one of all 3. So you'll see, too, that on this one, some of them are really hard to see. So the red little missiles are hard to see. And you'll see also that some don't look like they destroyed the missile, but I think it did because I'm basing it on, you'll see one of these coming up. I'm basing it on the fact that the missile did no damage. And I also lost track of the PD. It just disappeared. So I'm assuming that it hit. And I think that happened on some of the other tests too. So, listen, it's not perfect. It's not scientific. But you can see this one's doing a pretty good job. I think we're up to like 4 destroyed and a lot damaged. Yeah. So let's count them up and let's do a quick summary. Okay. Yeah. So we had 4 destroyed and 8 damage, which is really good. 67% to hit rate. And the ship was hardly damaged. So that's a really good results. It is tier 3, but it's still really good results. So let's take a look at the next test. Okay, the Interceptor Missile version 2. So its big problem here is it only does 6 damage. So we're going to need 3 missiles to hit to destroy a target. That's a big problem. It also has a low rate of fire. And it doesn't always fire. Well, actually, a couple of things we've noticed throughout all the tests, right? They don't always fire their full volley after maybe the first 2 or 3, which is kind of a strange thing. I don't know if that's a bug or if it's a recharging issue. But it happens to all the weapons, right? And particularly for the missiles, for these interceptors, it's going to be a problem. Not going to do a lot of damage overall. And there's a big gap between, like I said, their firing. So, not sure. Now, I think, and I did do this in the fighter test. So when I get to the fighter test, it's much better when there's 2 of them, right? The problem is that they're 13 in size. So that's 26 size just for 2 of them. But when there are 2 of them, at least in my test, the next test you'll see, they do much, much better against fighters when there's 2 of them. And I would suspect the same here, though I didn't run that particular test. Okay, I think we're about done. Oh, good. We got 1 more damaged. Okay. As a single one, it just doesn't pay off. All right, so let's take a look. So they only got 2 destroyed and 1 damaged. 54% hit rate, not terrible. And they did take some significant damage relative to the other test anyway. So again, as we mentioned, 90% of the missiles got through. The interceptor missile just not worth the 19 cost for 1 of them. Okay, last but not least, the PDC, point defense cannons. Let's take a look at them. They have a 6 strength, so that's another problem we talked about earlier with interceptor missiles. 3 of them are going to have to hit to take out these missiles. So let's see how they do. One note here from the previous 4, for all the ones from the previous 4 too, is if I don't count misses, so you'll see it said 3 hits destroyed. I don't count the 4th one as a miss because it had no target to kill. So when these PDCs shoot 4 in a row, they're shooting at the same missile. So if the first 3 hit, I don't consider the 4th one to have missed. So you'll see through my calculations that you may notice some discrepancies in misses and hits, and that's because I'm not counting those kind of misses. All right. Again, just like my other weapons here, the PDCs suddenly start shooting 1s and 2s instead of 4s. I don't know why that is. Again, that'd be interesting for discussion if anybody wants to put something down in the comments as to why they think that might be. But you can see the PDCs are actually doing really well here. They're doing a lot of damage and not so much destroying. I think they destroyed 3 so far, but they are damaging a lot. And like I said earlier, damaging almost takes out the missile because, maybe it does 4 damage. You can watch it as it goes through, maybe 4 or 5 damage, but that's about it. So, I made a little more here because it only does 6 damage to the missile, but still, look at those results. That's pretty good, right? So 3 destroyed, 9 damage, and 62% hit. Not bad to hit. And the shield damage was only 5%. So I think this is a pretty good result. The PDCs definitely shined here. They are expensive, though, in size, right? So they are 13 each, and I have 2 of them on there, so that's 26 in size. So when we do our final review in a few seconds, that'll take into consideration. But other than that, the PDCs did really well. They neutralized over half of the targets. It's not really fair to say neutralized because their damage is a little less than some of the other PDCs. So, the other PDs, excuse me. So they're not so much neutralizing it, whereas the other ones with higher damage, even 1 shot will pretty much damage the missile to be very ineffective. So I should say it's a 1-to-1 in that comparison. All right, let's put up our final chart here and take a look at it. Okay, so here's my rankings. Looks like the Sentinel multi-beam defense has usurped the Buckler repeating blaster. I still like both of these. You'll see I put the blaster as number 2. I like both of these for the reason that they are small in size, right? So putting 2 of them on there costs only 20 in size and 22 in size, and that really beats everything else. They're also only tier 2, right? So you're going to get these a lot earlier or a little bit earlier than the other PDs. And they'll upgrade to tier 4, where some of these won't. The PDCs will, but I think the other ones will not. If they're always the underdogs here because they're only tier 2. When we get to the tier 4 version of them, they're even better, right? So we could have easily made a chart where those 2 were tier 4 and everything else was tier 3. So the fact that they perform so well at only tier 2, and I know they get only better from there. In fact, I use them in the fighters, in the fighter section in the back of this video. I use their tier 4 versions, and they're really, really effective. So I'm still putting them as 1 and 2. I like them both. I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. The surprise here might be the blocking field generator, and I'll tell you why. Although it didn't perform nearly as well as the PDCs or the ion blaster, it's only 1, right? I only installed 1 on this test, and it held up pretty well, right? It does take everything out. One shot takes out everything. It's hard to tell, as I mentioned in that section of the video, what's going on because it doesn't always show the beam, and so I'm assuming that some of these missiles that didn't do any damage are being destroyed by it. So there's a little bit of an unknown there, and again, that's something we could discuss in the comments. But considering that it's only 15, right? It's only 15 in size, and it's still doing okay compared to the other 2, right? It's saving even more space. If that could replace 2 of my Sentinel beam multi-beams, then or even kind of hold its own against it a little bit, then that's really, really powerful. So that's why I ranked it as number 3, because even at 1 installed, it does pretty good, and that 25 damage is appealing too. The interceptor missile, of course, does not do well. You'll see it in action in the next videos where I show the fighters, and you'll see that with 2 of them installed, although it's a lot of size to dedicate to PDs, but when 2 of them installed, they actually do pretty well. And of course, this was a test on seeking weapons, so they're naturally weaker than they are against fighters. So I knew they were going to perform even worse than the last video. But again, this is tier 3 and tier 2, right? So you may want to evaluate for yourselves on tier 4 and tier 5. And, as a final note before we go on to look at the fighter performance, which will be a bunch of quick videos, I hope you get to watch the videos and you can make your own decisions, right? You may find some typos. You may find I didn't count right, or I assumed something that you wouldn't have assumed. So what, right? That's good. So you use the videos, you do your own calculations based on my videos, and you decide what's good for you. So you may not agree with me, and that's great. Throw it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And if there were mistakes, you go through the data, right? You go through and decide what's best, and we can certainly discuss it in the comments. All right, I hope that was informative for you. I'm done with PD. This is the last video for sure. I'm going to move on to some other things. But before we go, let's take a look at the fighter performance at tier 4 or 5. Okay, this is a tier 4 blocking field generator. So this is not the same as the tier 2, tier 3 test that I did earlier. These are later, slightly later generations. And I'm throwing 16 fighters at them from a nearby pirate base, but I'm out of range of the pirate base. Is direct firing. So it's just going to be the 5 destroyers fighting off 16 fighters. And I'll go back and forth between the fighter base so you can see how many fighters and bombers are left. I guess there's 8 bombers and 8 fighters. Again, with the blocking field, it seems to always be, right, these little yellow lines, but sometimes damage happens without them. So as I mentioned earlier in the versus seeking missiles, video that I'm not really sure why that happens or if that's actually happening. So each of these videos is very short. I just let them run. I do go back and forth between the pirate base. So you can see here there's 16 still left. I haven't taken one out yet at all. And, you know, like I said, it's not always apples to apples. I'm trying to keep the ships in basically range is all I'm doing by all these movements. But, you know, one ship's going off a little bit to the upper left, and in the other videos they'll be slightly more separated. So not a perfect comparison, but it gives you a feel for how they'd perform 5 ships against 16. And this is only one, as I usually do for the blocking field. There's only one installed in the ship. And I believe that the ships don't have any other weapons as well, so just the PD. Anyway, they're not doing so well. As you can see here, I think all 16 fighters still exist. They haven't shot down anything yet, and I believe at least 1 or 2 are disabled. At least 1 is disabled, and or their components are damaged so that they can't fire PDs anymore, one of the 2. And sometimes I hover over the ships to see, but you can tell nobody's going down with this one. So this is tier 4 blocking field generator, and they haven't destroyed a single fighter yet. Yep, and both of these are either disabled or they've lost some weapons. So let's go to the next one. Let's go to bucklers and see how they fare. All right, let's take a look at the buckler repeating blaster. It's got a strength of 12 against intercept fighters. This is tier 4, which is 2 tiers above what we did in the seeking missile videos. I also put up the bomber and fighter stats. Bombers are just got an extra shield and an extra torpedo, otherwise, and they're a little bit bigger, but otherwise they're the same as the fighters. Actually, the game uses fighters interchangeably. I think they call the quote-unquote fighters interceptors and the bombers bombers, I think, so it's a little confusing on that. But there's 8 of each, just like before. I'll keep clicking on the base and back and forth so you can see how many they take out. It's happening pretty quickly. I'm at 1 time speed as compared to the 0.25 speed from the earlier videos. So if that's confusing you, just check the speed difference. It's one of the fighter battle to run out, and then we'll just see the results. So you can see they've already taken out 2 bombers, which I think is more than the blocking field did. And I think they're okay. They're taking damage. Some of them, yeah, about half their shields are down. But you're going to see they do a little bit better. Significantly better than the blocking field. There are 2 of them installed, and these are tier 4, which is the same tier as the blocking field, but different than the earlier tests, which were tier 2. All right, I'm just going to let it run out. They're down to 2 bombers, and the bombers are the more dangerous of the 2. So now they're down to 1 bomber, and they're still in pretty good shape. They're probably, some of them have half shield damage. Not sure if they're disabled yet. Yep, that guy's at half shield. So they're doing pretty well. Let's see how far they get. They're down to, okay, all the bombers are gone. The 8 building just means that the star base, the pirate base is trying to rebuild them. They won't in time for this, the rest of this battle, or if they do, they won't. It'll be insignificant. And they're still holding their own. Let's see. Yeah, doing pretty good. I mean, you could run this slow motion, I guess, and count all the hits and misses. It would be crazy time consuming. The amount of time I spent doing that for the seeking videos was more than I care to do again here. But you could do it and figure out the hit ratio. And, you know, that's another thing about my earlier stats. Just want to re-comment on that. You know, it's one run through, right? So the percent damage that they're, or the percent to hit, for example, is, you know, just a rough estimate. You'd have to run a lot of experiments and count a lot of shots before you could come up with something that would match the formula. And even the formula I'm not completely sure about, as I mentioned earlier in the other video. All right, starting to slow down here. Less ships. Less fighters. And there's no bombers left. Let's go back and check it out. Yep, they're down to 5 interceptors. Okay, great. So they're doing pretty well. I think they're all still firing at this point. The one in the back upper right, maybe not. Might be disabled, or he might have lost the PD weapon. Component damage. All right. Yeah. I'm still doing pretty good. I'm just going to let the video run. You can watch the rest, and I'll comment at the end. Okay, so at this point, they're down to 4 fighters. They did rebuild one of the bombers, so we wouldn't count that. I don't know if it's actually arrived here yet or not, but it looks like the fighters actually pulled off. So they're down to 3 interceptors. So they did pretty well. They are damaged. They may have some component damage. I didn't check each one, but they're all still alive. So they did pretty well. That's a pretty good result. All right, so this is the Sentinel multi-beam defense, but unfortunately it's only tier 2. For some reason I couldn't get the research prereq for tier 4, and I couldn't even figure it out, which was totally bizarre. So these guys are at a massive disadvantage than the other ones we're testing here, which are all tier 4. So you'll see they don't do as well, but they still do better than the blocking field. So I expect with a tier 4 that they would do much better. They don't do terrible here. They do take out about half of the fighters, but they end up losing. They end up getting mostly disabled. Again, sorry about not being able to do a tier 4 here, but again, you can see how they do versus the blocking field. I think it's still a good field for how they do. They do take out almost all the bombers, I believe. Like I said, about half. And I'll just let it run, and then at the end I'll make a quick comment. Okay, so they've taken out most of the bombers. Again, I'm expecting these not so good results because it's only tier 2. I'm sure the tier 4 Sentinel would stand up to the bucklers and probably do as well or almost as well. So I'm not taking this as a as a direct comparison, as I mentioned earlier. So I think they did okay. They certainly did better than the blocking field. And with the tier 4, I think it'd be fine. All right, let's. This will finish up soon. Now, unfortunately, the building caught up, so it actually added a bomber. But we would have marked this as, 1 interceptor destroyed, 7 bombers destroyed. So about half of the fighters were destroyed for this tier 2 Sentinel PD. All right, let's go to the next one. All right, let's check out the Ion Pulse Blaster. This is a tier 3. There is no tier 4 Ion Pulse Blaster, so this is the same ship that we used in the Seeking videos, fighting the missiles. So we'll see how they do against fighters. Again, this is 1 tier lower than the Buckler fighter video. Let's see how they do. While we're watching them take on these fighter ships, I do want to mention something that came up. If you're still with me, congratulations, 35 minutes in. I'm going to mention something about from the combat video, and also mentioned briefly in this video earlier, which was the shield bypass. I get a lot of questions about this. So the 25% shield bypass means that if you're shooting a 16 strength missile, which is at this tech roughly, I think the concussion missile, or one of the concussion missiles, maybe the large missile is 16. If the 16 missile hits a shield, only 12 of it will hit the shield and 4 of it will bypass, will go through the shield and attack the armor. The problem is the armor's reactive rating takes off, just like the shield resistance takes off right off the top, you know, somewhere around 4 damage, depending upon what tech we're at. But at this tier 4 tech, the armor is, I believe, 4 reactive. So what that basically means is, if you've got a 25% shield bypass, it's only useful if you have a lot of damage, like 30 or 24, maybe 40 damage, and your shields only have like a 4 reactive rating. Because otherwise, 25% of 16 is not going to do any damage to the armor. And if you've watched some of my early videos, that's what's actually happening. So as long as the armor keeps up, and eventually the higher level tiers of weapons, I'm sure, will be better at this. But in this mid-range here where we are in tier 4, tier 3, the shield bypass is the positive shield bypass is actually not that great, right? Because you're giving up 25% damage on the shields and doing nothing to the armor typically. By the way, a negative bypass rating just means you're not good against shields. So if you have a minus 25%, it's basically the same result without the bypass, right? Without going to the armor. But because the armor resistance fights off at least those 4 points in the case of 16 total damage, it works out about the same. A negative or positive bypass really has the same effect at this point in the game. All right, so let's see how they did here. The ion blasters. There's still a lot. Oh, we got a couple disabled here. And they took out pretty well. They took out 6 bombers. 3 bombers and 4 interceptors. Took out about half of the fighters. And this is a tier 3 weapon. So they did okay, not great. Let's go to the next one. Let's look at the interceptor missiles. Now, I did something a little different here. First of all, this is tier 4. They have the same damage. They have just a little more range and better intercept targeting. But otherwise, they're very similar to tier 3. But they're tier 4 missile. And I put 2 of them in here because I just wanted to see what happens. I'm not doing apples to apples here. That's very expensive size-wise, right? So that's going to be 19 each for size. So that's huge. It's a lot of PD dedication. But I wanted to give them a chance because they've been doing so terrible in all these videos to see, see what would happen if we put 2 in at tier 4. So let's let this video run. We'll see how they do, and I'll summarize it at the end. Okay, let's look at the points defense cannons. This is a tier 4 weapon. The only thing that changes from tier 3 is the range, and the intercept targeting is plus 35%, so it's a little bit better, but basically they're the same as tier 3, certainly as far as damage goes. There's 2 installed as always. Let's see how they do. So again, this wasn't an apples to apples with all the fighters, but at least these PDCs and the bucklers are at the same tier 4 level. So if you did want to compare those, as well as the interceptor missiles, I put 2 in, so it's not really a good comparison. But these are at the same level as the buckler. So let's see how they do, at least compared to those. I think the buckler will come out ahead. Again, smaller size too, right? We're talking about buckler size 10, whereas these point defense cannons are 13. So that's why they're not going to be on my favorite list. They're not terrible here, and they certainly did okay against the seeking missiles. But they're 13 size, so 2 of them are going to cost you 26 in size, versus 2 of the buckler repeating blasters going to cost you 20, 10 each. All right, they've taken out 2 bombers so far. They look like they're in okay shape. They are taking damage. Let's let this run, and I'll just summarize at the end.